Did I pronounce your surname right, Paul? Should I check that?
Yeah, Paul Bauer, like
Bauer, like
Jack.
Jack Bauer. Yeah,
Exactly,
24,
like
yeah.
Jack Bauer. Yeah,
Brilliant. Love that.
Uncle
Love that.
Jack.
Haven't seen that for years. That's a blast, that.
Oh, I love that series, man. When I discovered it, when it first came out, I was going to college and I couldn't get into it because I had so much homework to do and I was also working full time. And I just couldn't get into it because you have to watch every episode. But then
Yeah.
years later, after I was, an IT manager and I didn't have much going on, like on a day to day, I had plenty of time to watch it. And I binge watched all of those episodes. It was a really good series.
Yeah, it's brilliant, man. But they do get you because every episode ends on a cliffhanger, doesn't it? Every single one.
Yep.
And it's just like you just want to watch the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah, how's he going to get out of it this time? And then you wait next week and you're like, oh, that's how. Oh, man, now he's in another pickle. Like,
yeah, I used to love that. To be fair, I love Kiefer Sutherland. He's brilliant.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's a great actor. Yeah, his dad's a good actor, too. Yeah, is his dad still around? I don't know if his dad's still around, but Donald Sutherland's good, too.
Paul, can you tell people a little bit about yourself so they kind of have an idea of who you are, what you're all about?
Yeah, I'm one of those, internet alpha males. I'm a white guy with a podcast, and so people don't like me very much. No, I'm a men's relationship coach now. It didn't start off that way though. I got into the space after some pretty hard times, right? Like just to give you my Batman origin story, I was one of those guys that was pretty good with women when I was in high school and in my late teens and stuff like that. But I always had this sniper mentality when it came to dating, right? Like one girl at a time, and like the one girl that's nice to me, I go all in on this one, and I think she's the one, and right. And so I had a bunch of different girlfriends, but it was always the same thing. I was always like, pushing for exclusivity. I was always, trying to, run towards that white picket fence. I thought I was going to marry every one of these girls. I finally, when I was 18, I left for the Navy. I joined the US Navy. And 2 years into that enlistment, I met my now ex-wife. Right. And so I was 19 when we eloped, and then we were 20 when we had our official wedding for the family. But I got married before I was even old enough to drink. Like here in the US, you can't drink until you're 21. In the UK, it's what, 5? How old you guys?
Yeah, you got to start them young. As soon as you get off formula, you're straight onto the beer, really.
Right, perfect. Yeah, because you got to be able to hang out at the pubs. But
yeah, that's it,
man. But yeah, so I rushed into this marriage. I didn't even know this girl very well. We met when I came home on leave. So I was stationed in California, and I came home to Colorado on leave, and I met her out here, and then we had this long distance relationship for almost a year before I convinced her to move out to San Diego with me, and we got an apartment together, and then we were getting ready to go on a series of deployments. So I was going to go on a 3-month training deployment, come back for a month, and then be gone for 6 months on a what we call a Westpac, which is a deployment to the Middle East. And so I was like, I've got to make sure I take care of this girl, because that's what a man does. A man provides, So, and I taken her away from her support system, so she's my responsibility now. So I said, hey, let's elope, because that way the government will give us, housing allowance so that we can have, pay for an apartment. You could be on my medical, so you don't have to worry about medical. If I, get blown up in some kind of freak Navy accident, you can have my life insurance. Like you'll be well taken care of. I just met this girl like a year ago, right? Barely knew her in person for about 3 months before we eloped. And so it's one of those things where guys will do that. Guys will rush into a long-term commitment. They'll rush into marriage, and they won't give themselves enough time to look at red flags and analyze red flags. They'll sniper date, like I talked about, where they will go one girl at a time and be immediately exclusive as soon as they start talking to a girl. And that doesn't give them the time and I would say experience to be able to, weigh your best options or anything, right? It's like a lot of guys do that. And so luckily we stayed together for about 14 years, and we have 2 kids. but the last half of that marriage was just absolute misery, Aaron. Like there was days where I would work 17-hour days just to avoid going home because I knew that as soon as I came into the house, I was going to get an earful, and I just didn't want to deal with any of that. So I just work extra at work and just, focus on putting food on the table and then come home, go to sleep and try to ignore her. There was days where I didn't even want to sleep in the same room as her. So I'd go out through the garage and I'd grab a cot and go sleep in my office. It was just absolute misery, but I never would have quit because I'm the traditional type of guy who was like, I made vows, you know, through sickness and in health, no matter what, like you don't quit, you just suck it up, and you're basically supposed to be miserable for the rest of your life, right? Because that's what like a lot of us learn our relationships from our parents. And if you look at my parents, they're still together. They're coming up on their 50th wedding anniversary, but they hate each other, right? And so, but that's how I was raised, where it's like, yeah, it's all hot and heavy in the beginning. You have a couple of kids, and then it just goes downhill from there. And then you're supposed to be a miserable workhorse the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be that way, but I didn't learn that until she filed for divorce. So fast forward to 2014. She ended up filing for divorce, and it was just a tremendous weight lifted off my chest. I was like, oh, thank God she had the courage to do that, because I never would have quit. I would have just resolved to be miserable the rest of my life. And so then I found myself back on the dating circuit after having not practiced dating in 15 years, and I just floundered around. It's a modern landscape. Dating apps weren't a thing when I met her. So now it's dating apps and modern women and a lot of modern conveniences, but I just didn't understand the landscape. So I just floundered for a whole year until another woman took pity on me, right? And I was also 50 pounds overweight, like I was out of shape, and that I think contributed to the end of my marriage as well. But I found this girl who was a little bit of a chubby chaser, and I lovingly say that, and I just immediately go all in, just same patterns, right? Just, oh, this one girl's nice to me, I'm going to go all in. And I get into a 4.5-year relationship with this girl. Now, the blessing of that relationship was I decided to take my health back. So about a year into that, I lost all the weight. But I fell back on the old relationship patterns. I never learned my lesson from the marriage. And so I immediately went into like husband mode, where I thought I reached this mythical finish line. And I stopped doing all the attractive things I was doing in the beginning. And I was just sort of resting on my laurels, like I don't have to do anything. I already got her kind of mentality. Well, about 2 years into that relationship, she checked out mentally and started lining up her male orbiters. And I don't care who you are, every woman has male orbiters, right? She might not be exercising those, but she's got guys that are just, barking up her tree on a daily basis, offering to take her to lunch, whatever. They're in her DMs. And so when women mentally check out of the relationship, a lot of times they tend to look around at the guys in their vicinity that have been, sort of hitting on them for the last several years. So that's what she did. She starts lining these guys up, and about at the four-year mark, she starts really pushing me away, starts acting sort of distant. She starts hanging out with these guys at the office a lot more. She doesn't want me to come around anymore. And it got to a point where I was kind of sick of it, and I was like, okay, this isn't working for me. So I ended up breaking up with her. The last time I went down to her house, she like I used to go down to her house every other week, and I would bring my dog down there. So she had a dog bed down there for me. She had toothbrush, for me. She had dog dishes for me. And I go down there, and the last time I went down there, she had all of them hidden away. She had the dog bed hidden in the closet. The dog dishes were out in her garage somewhere. My toothbrush was down in the drawer. And oh, by the way, one of her coworkers happened to stop by and loan her a ladder to help her paint her bedroom. And like at that time, I was like, wow, that was really nice of him, But it was still really questionable, But we broke up like right after that. And then I just, after I found myself back on the dating circuit again, this time it was a lot easier. It was like I was able to get dates now because I was 50 pounds, lighter. I was in much better shape, but I couldn't keep women around longer than 2 or 3 dates. I was just like, what am I doing wrong? I'm like repelling women. The two biggest relationships in my life, my adult life, have failed, and every girl I go on a date with, I can't keep them around longer than 2 or 3 dates. Like I'm clearly doing something wrong. Like I'm the common denominator here. So I decided one of the blessings from that last relationship was she was really big into audiobooks. And so I was like, I bet you there's some audiobooks that'll help me figure out women better and the psychology of attraction and relationship dynamics. And because a lot of guys don't realize this, most people, women especially, we just don't have the skills to maintain and manage relationships. That's why divorce is like we have a 50% divorce rate in the West. So I was like, I'm going to learn these skills because I never want this to happen again. So I took a deep dive. I read countless books. Some of them I read 10 to 15 times. That's what I sort of, in hindsight, realized what was going on with her, and that she was probably having that affair at the end of the relationship. And but I'm not one of those guys because I put out content in what we call the red pill space, and a lot of the red pill space gets a bad rap because a lot of guys come to the space because they're hurt. They've had some kind of really negative experience, and they don't take the time to reflect on like what the learning opportunity is, and it's always blame the women, and women are hypergamous by nature, and whatever. And it's like, yeah, they are, but once you understand how it works, you can use it to your advantage. So that's what I try to do in the space. I try to take these basically biological and psychological truths about men and women and figure out, hey, how do we make this work? Right. And so I never want what happened to me in those two relationships to happen to another guy, because it hurts, man. It hurts going through a divorce. It's scary. You lose half your crap. It took me about 5 years to get out of debt after that, because I had to get a new place, refurnish an apartment, like all that kind of stuff. I had to pay her over $100,000 in alimony over a period of 5 years. I'm still paying her child support, even though, one of my kids is an adult now, and the other one is, he's got about 4 years left in high school. So I still have to pay her child support. I mean, it's a financial and emotional crap storm that guys don't realize that they can avoid if they have some of these skills. So I've sort of made it my mission to teach men some of these relationship skills and understand women's hypergamous nature so that they can use it to their advantage and maintain healthy relationships in the process.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Paul. I think as well that I think, like you say, the red pill space gets a lot of criticism, and I think that's because a lot of people see the extremes in that side of it, where people go too far one way or too far the other way. You know what I mean? And that's the danger, right? We go to the extremes and we're not looking at things objectively. But it sounds like you're looking at things objectively, and and trying to understand what's actually going on, and how we can benefit, I suppose, or how we can actually play the game the way that everybody else has played it, I suppose. That's
Yeah, well, I mean, and I understand it too, because I study NLP, right? Neuro linguistic programming. I got certified in that. And one of the biggest things that I found fascinating in that process is just understanding that we as humans have a negativity bias in our brains. Like, we're wired to look for the bad in our environment. That's an evolutionary psychology thing, because back when the caveman days, you wanted to be hyper aware of like saber-toothed tigers that are trying to kill you, right? That's a negative. So we tend to focus on the negative, and we like to gather and commiserate with each other. And so it's much easier for men to get together and blame women, blame the 80% of divorces are filed by women, and then never do anything about it. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, there's some truth to that, right? But and so there, a lot of guys argue, well, men should never get married. Like, maybe they shouldn't, right? But there are guys that didn't get that memo, and so they are married. So what do we do with those guys, right? So that's that's where I come in from the red pill space, going, hey, there's guys that didn't get the memo. They are still married. They're in a bad situation. Like, how can we help these men?
Yeah, and equally, some might be in good marriages, and they're happy and they're making it work. You know what I mean? So there's
Right.
there's multiple layers to this, isn't there? And I was just talking on my last podcast episode. Actually, we spent a lot of time on negativity bias and the fact that we are, the whole misery loves company and all that. But you have got to be careful in it that you're being objective and you're not just acting from that kind of emotional pain place where you're not seeing the mistakes that you're making as well and the stuff that you could do to make that better potentially, because often it's a two-sided thing. And then you look at the stats as well. You look at the, like you said, is it 80%? I knew it was high ratio, but is it 80% of females that
It's
initiate divorce?
it's something like that. I don't know
Higher.
what the exact stat is.
But that just brings me back to where you were at earlier and what you said, that you would have stuck it out and you would have stayed with it. And I think that is a very male mentality, especially if you've got kids. You kind of, I'm going to stick it out and stay the course now because I have an obligation to do that.
Yeah, we men have this sense of duty, and it's sort of ingrained in us, through society. It's a paradigm that we're told, like, you have to. You're a man provides, right? You're a provider. The thing is that a lot of guys, when they get married, they go hard in the provider role, right? And the things that guys don't understand about women's hypergamous nature is that provider role is what we call a beta trait. Right. So that, a lot of people don't like the terms alpha and beta. And that's fine. It makes it really easy to explain what's happening. But if you don't like that term, we can say, instead of alpha, you might say guys that women want to have sex with. And then instead of beta, you could say men that women don't want to have sex with. Right. So whatever you want to call it. But guys they go hard on the provider side. We call that the beta bucks side of hypergamy. Like, women are dualistic by nature as a part of their sexual strategy. They want a guy who's sexually attractive, that really spikes that dopamine in her, that makes her feel excited and alive, right? But they also need a guy that's kind and nurturing, that can take care of her kids, that will, put food on the table. So they want a guy with both traits. The problem is that a lot of women have a hard time finding a guy with both traits, right? So what they'll do a lot of times is, like, in their 20s, they'll sleep around with, these guys that have the alpha traits. And then they'll decide, I'm done playing the games and I'm ready to settle down. And they'll settle down with a guy that has a lot of beta traits in their 30s, and they'll be unhappy in their marriages, because they think that they want that, and they do, but it's just not sexually attractive to them. So you end up in a dead bedroom type situation. Another thing that guys end up doing too is they will be the attractive guy, right? They will be the guy that spikes that dopamine, that makes her, like, it's really hot and heavy in the beginning. I would say a good portion of relationships are like that, where everything is hot and heavy in the beginning. She's excited. She loves this new experience. You're doing fun things with her. And then through a process called the betaization process, which I talk about in my latest book. Can I plug it real quick? Get her to F you again. Yeah. But the betaization process is a process that's subconscious with women, where they will take a guy who's sexually attractive, that's exciting, and she will try to manipulate and change him to where he's more of a beta provider. And then if he lets her manipulate him, she loses respect for him over time, and then she loses attraction because she was able to manipulate him. It's like, think Beauty and the Beast, right? Beauty spends the whole movie taking this wild, untamed, masculine, beast of a guy, and tries to turn him into this civilized, prince guy who, in 10, 15 years, she's not going to want to bang anymore. So that's, women do this to guys, and guys let that happen because they don't know what's happening. So, so one of the things I try to teach guys is, like, how to recognize what's happening so that you can stay the attractive guy throughout the long-term relationship. Because if you stay that guy, she's going to look at you like her best hypergamous option. Like, women are always looking, they're like, hypergamy is always asking the question, can I do better? Right. And if you're always that guy who stays attractive, you keep her excited, you keep her engaged, you keep her wanting to invest in you, she's always going to go, can I do better? No, I don't think I can. I think he's my best hypergamous option. And then she'll love you, as women do. And men and women tend to love differently. And just from a psychological perspective, they love completely differently. And a lot of guys get really butthurt by that, because a man's definition of love, it would be like what the Bible defines it as, right? Because, like it or not, men actually wrote the Bible, right? Might have been divinely inspired. You can argue that. I'm not going to get into, theology, but men actually put pen to paper and wrote some of the stuff out. So a lot of those concepts come from men on what love should be, but that's not how women love. Like women are love more opportunistically than men do. Men are more of the idealists, the romantics, right? And so a lot of guys, when they find out women don't love them the same way, they get really butthurt by that. And, like, oh, we can't ever have a good relationship. It's like, you just got to let that go,
Yeah,
sort of
it's
embrace reality.
yeah. I think I've been through that myself. It's the whole Wizard of Oz thing when you see behind the curtain, and then you're like, really disappointed that everything that you've built up in your mind over your life, you realize that actually it ain't like that.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, I want to be Prince Charming. I want to ride in on a trusty steed and rescue the princess and have her love me happily ever after. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
And
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 that's the stories that we told, right? That's the stories that we're like sold on, and it's just about the male sacrifices and strong and save the day and all that kind of thing. And that's the kind of we grow up on that, right? We grow up on that kind of imagery and that buy into it, and then you get rudely awoken at some point and realize that actually you got to rethink everything that you ever thought.
right. Yeah, but once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? It's like if you look at modern romantic comedies, right? Or Hallmark movies, what tends to happen in there is actually more realistic than people realize, but it's romanticized like it's a good thing. But what typically happens is a woman will be with a guy she's not satisfied with. He's kind of a loser. She makes fun of him all the time. He's inept. But then some handsome guy comes into the picture, and all of a sudden she's like, "Oh, I found my true love." So basically, it's romanticized cheating, right? At the end of the day, where she dumps this guy for a better guy. Well, that's hypergamy as an example, but that's if you look at it from, okay, what can you learn from that? Well, this guy over here that she dumped, he probably wasn't doing the attractive things that would have kept her engaged to begin with. So it's like, okay, whose fault is it here, right? A lot of times it's really easy to point fingers at other people, men pointing fingers at women. It's super hard to point fingers back at yourself saying, what can I do better to be more of an attractive person that women actually want to be around? I have a friend in the space. His name is Ryan Stone, and he says men really have to work on being more effable, you know. And so that's really what it comes down to. If she's not wanting to sleep with you anymore, you've been in a long term relationship for like past the 7 year mark, and everything's fading down. It's not because attraction or not because yes, it's normal for sex to fade over time. It's not. It's that you've allowed attraction to fade, and she's no longer attracted to you anymore. So you have to change that dynamic if you want things to be happy, right? Like a lot of guys are looking for their peace. Like you have to create your own peace.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Paul, but I think it's even more difficult in kind of modern society now, where I, I don't want to push too far one way, but ultimately it does seem to me like men are seen as bad and the enemy a lot of the time, and society is trying to push men to be more. So we talked about earlier about the females kind of finding an alpha male, kind of pushing him to be more beta, more, you
Yeah.
know, placid and stuff like that, which is probably because then that's better for nurturing and raising children and that kind of thing. That's probably the evolutionary thing, which within a relationship, that's probably fine and the balance would probably be okay. But when all of society is trying to push you that way as well from a young age, then ultimately you lose in some of that kind of character and strength that you would naturally have, that boisterousness that comes with being a man, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and this has been going on since World War II. Have you ever read No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover by
No, I
chance?
haven't actually.
Oh, I highly recommend that book. It's a good one. So Dr. Glover, he basically talks about how ever since, especially in the West, right, we moved from more of an agrarian society to an industrial society. We've taken men out of the picture for boys, and boys are more raised by women now, right? And women do their best, right? It's not that crap on women, but a woman can't really teach a boy to be a man. She's not equipped for it, unfortunately. Just like I'm not equipped to tell my daughter how to be a woman. Like she needs her mom in the picture for that. But a lot of boys are raised either in single mother households, or if dad is in the picture, he's working 17-hour days because he doesn't want to come home and yeah, get the get a an earful. So men are largely out of the picture, and then now women also work, right? So now what do? They put them in daycare, they put them in school. A lot of daycares and schools, something like 90% women ran. So boys are just not taught to be men anymore. A really good book on it is Boy Crisis by Warren Farrell. He really breaks down the problem, the masculinity crisis that we're having in the West. And then the problem with that book though is that he really doubles down on what got us there in the first place, right? Like, oh, men need to be able to be more vulnerable. Like they should be able to cry more. They should be able to act more like women, right? Instead of fixing the problem, which is to teach men how to be men. My good friend RP Thor wrote a book a couple years ago called A Dominant Masculine Presence, which also addresses the masculinity crisis, but it teaches guys how to have a dominant masculine presence. And my second book I wrote last year is a part of that series because he asked us, a bunch of us in the space, to write books in a series based on that first book. So I created Psychology Paradigm as my second book, which is all about reprogramming your subconscious mind to have more of that dominant masculine presence and less be, like not have so much of those beta traits. You still have to have them if you want to have a long-term relationship, I should say, right? You got to be able to sprinkle a little beta on things because your wife
Yeah.
does need that.
It's
But
about balance, right?
right, but a lot of guys lead with that, right? They lead with the nurturer stuff, and it's just not sexually attractive. And so they want a best friend. They think that she's their partner. They use the term partner. The the problem with partner is that a lot of guys look at their wife like an equal in the relationship, and when they do that, it sounds good on paper, right? Like men and women are equal in society, right? But in a relationship dynamic, uh, when men do that, what they tend to do is they will defer to their wives, right? So let's say they have a major purchasing decision, like, hey, my relationship's failing, I need a relationship coach. Right? So then they'll say, oh, I can't possibly get the hire a coach to learn the skills I need to have a healthy relationship because I gotta talk to the old ball and chain, right? And so they'll go to their wife and say, honey, I really want to do this, can I get your buy-in? That makes her the decider. That actually makes her above you in the relationship. And a woman's hypergamous nature needs to see you as above her in some way. And so when you do that, you're deferring to her, even though you think it's an equal partnership. She's now the decider, and now she's going to shoot that down. Now she's going to lose respect for you because you had to come to her for permission, like all that kind of stuff, right? So guys have to sort of I recommend guys stop looking at their relationships like an equal partnership, and it's more healthy to look at it more like a captain executive officer relationship where and I use that because I'm a former sailor, right? But the captain of a ship, he's overall in charge of the mission of the ship. So your relationship is the ship, right? And your wife is the executive officer, which is still a leadership role, but you're still ultimately responsible. So, she might have some good ideas. There's no reason why you can't take whatever she says under advisement. But at the end of the day, you've got to be the leader. You got to be decisive. You got to be the one that sets the tone and leads that relationship. And when you do that, it allows her to relax more into her feminine, and you have more of this sexual polarity in the relationship. And that actually creates a more healthy dynamic in the long run. But society tells us that we have to be equal partners. So that's completely ruined that dynamic.
Yeah, and I get that because you look at all kind of other animals, even similar to us, like kind of chimps and stuff like that. It's bonobos. They all have that kind of hierarchy almost, if you want to call it that, um, which makes it function, and you take that away, and it does make it more difficult, I suppose. And then equally, when I think about that, I think about the decision wise. When you get stuck in that trap where it's just like you just want peace, you just want an easy life, and you just like, yeah, you whatever you decide.
Yeah, that's what happens. That's what we call classic nice guy syndrome, right? And that comes from No More Mr. Nice Guy. But guys want their peace, so they end up deferring to their wife. They end up just becoming very agreeable. And it sounds, like I said, it sounds good on paper, right? Like, hey, like pick your battles here. But women, because they're sort of ran by their estrogen, they are more emotional beings. So they are like a roller coaster, right? And they actually do much better when a man in his masculine doesn't climb on her emotional roller coaster, can stand firm with his feet on the ground and provide a little bit of structure. So guys need to learn like how to set boundaries, how to tell their wife no, right? How to set the tone lead, how to be more decisive. And when they learn that, their wife actually respects them more, right? I was on a podcast, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and someone used the analogy of a man setting boundaries is like walking through a cave, right? Walking through a cave with your eyes shut. If you're walking through a cave, or maybe it's just dark in there, it doesn't matter, you can't see. But as long as you can feel the sides of the walls, like you feel like, okay, I'll get through this, right? You sort of have a sense of security. But if you go to push on the wall and the wall's caving in, like you don't feel very secure. Well, women are security seeking creatures. If you really want to get simplistic, they are looking for stability and security. And if you don't provide that structure through boundary setting, through being more assertive, being more decisive, it's like walking through the cave and not being able to feel the walls because you're easily manipulated, right? And so it really just comes back to being that kind of guy that sets the tone and leads that she respects. And but most guys lose that respect over time because she's able to manipulate them. Like I have we have a sort of a saying that women don't want to win, right? So like women might try to get you to do certain things, but they don't really want to win. They want to know that you're going to stand firm in your values and you're going to put your foot down when you need to. Um, and that actually makes them feel more secure in the relationship.
Yeah, I see this with it online, and I can't remember where I seen it or what it was from, but it w- I can't remember, but it was a female delivering it anyway, and but she was saying basically that females will try to manipulate you, but they want you to know that they're trying to manipulate you, and they want you to figure that out and stop it
Yeah.
a lot of the time. Sometimes they want you to let them have a little win here and there, but they want you to feel like so that they feel like they can't always get one over on you, because if they can, then
Yeah.
they feel like you're weak, sort of thing.
Well, that's and that's an annoying trait that women have that guys get really frustrated with is they basically want us to be mind readers, right? Well, you don't have to be a mind reader if you understand what's happening. If you understand women's evolutionary psychology when it comes to intersexual dynamics, like all women do this type of thing to some degree. Some do it more than others, right? But they will all do it to some degree. And so you can't avoid it. So you've got to learn how to deal with it. A lot of guys are like, oh, if a woman's doing that to me, I'm going to dump her and move on to the next one. Like, okay, well, the next one's going to do it too. So at some point, you got to learn how to do this. But yeah, women inherently want a guy that gets it, right? They want a guy that just understands what's happening, and they want the guy to play the game with them, but they don't want to know they're playing a game, right? So it's one of those things where you understand what's happening, you know how to sort of handle that situation, because like we call them like fitness tests and frame checks, and like, oh, there's all sorts of different things that women do. And if you know how to handle those, you almost like think it's kind of funny, and it ends up being fun to play this game. And that's all she wants. She wants you to really understand how this works and play the game with her. But a big problem guys get when they get into the space and they start studying this stuff is that when the woman starts doing that kind of stuff, they explain it back to her. Oh, I know what you're doing. You're doing what we call a fitness check, and this is how I'm handling it. I'm doing an agree and amplify. you know, and then women are like, ugh, like that disgusts me, and this red pill stuff is toxic and all this stuff, right? It's like women are like, oh, it's so manipulative and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, well, women invented manipulation. We're just swapping notes here, trying to teach the men folk how to deal with that. But women actually don't like that either, right? They don't like if you have to learn this stuff, that means you don't inherently get it, and that means you're not the right guy, right? This is their woman thinking, right? It's not rational, it's emotional. But um, but if you don't just inherently get it, or at least she does, if she doesn't believe that you inherently get it, like that will make her lose attraction too. Like, oh, you have to be taught this, right?
Yeah,
So a lot of the times when I'm working with men, I'm like, we don't want to we don't want to tell your wife that we're doing this, right? This is a sneak attack. We are going to level you up. We are going to give you the skills you need, and she's going to see these changes in you and go, I don't know what's happening here, but I like it, right? And that's where you want to be. You want her to have that sort of hamster wheel going. But if you tell her, hey, I'm going to start learning how to game you and I'm going to learn how to be more attractive for you, she's going to be like, what do you mean you have to learn that, right? Like all of a sudden that's unattractive behavior.
yeah. But do you think that's a genetic thing? Because when I think about that, I think that you know part of it, and it maybe subconsciously that they're looking for somebody who has good intuition. Because somebody who has good intuition is somebody who can make good decisions, look after you, and be that person that's going to pick up on things quickly and keep them safe almost.
Well, yeah, it comes from their evolutionary psychology, right? This is a trait that they've developed over thousands of years of like, hey, I need a guy who can acquire resources for me, and a guy that can acquire resources typically has these types of traits. They're decisive. They set the tone and lead. They keep their emotional control during a crisis situation. Like all those types of things, women naturally, like confidence, for example, right? Women are just naturally drawn to a confident man because it's the traits that guys have that can acquire resources. If you look at some of the most successful men in the world, like some of the top earners, if you ever read the book, Think and Grow Rich. The Napoleon Hill talks about this. He says the most successful men in the world make decisions very quickly and change their minds very rarely. Well, that's a trait of a successful person. So a lot of guys are complaining, oh, women just want a guy for money. No, it's the traits that you could use to acquire money that they find attractive, right? But that is a part of their wiring. That's like their firmware. They're looking for guys that can do that sort of thing. It's just that most guys aren't told that anymore, right? Or they don't pick that up from their fathers anymore because a lot of men are very weak now.
Yeah, and I think society, again, like I say, society pushes you to move away from that from a younger age now as well. So you're not kind of rewarded for being that brash. I'm going to go and do this kind of attitude. They want more agreeable people, or more, you know, I don't know, more passive traits, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Oh no,
And
no, society definitely pushes it. And that the funny thing is too is like I often say on my show, men aren't the only ones that are blue pilled. Like women are we call it like red pill and blue pill. It's a throwback to the Matrix, but women are raised with the same social programming that we are, right? So they think, yeah, equal partnership's good. I want a guy that's more caring and nurturing. I want a guy that's more vulnerable, right? But then they are consistently unhappy in relationships. And they're like, I don't know, where have all the real men gone? You hear that all the time, right? Well, it's because guys aren't, they're not doing what nature wants us to do, because society says, oh, we need to change all that, for the sake of, equality or whatever. It's like, fine, like let's have equality in the workplace. I'm a very traditional feminist, I would say. Like if a woman wants to be a trash truck driver, if she wants to be an oil rig worker, like by God, she should be able to go do that if she can, physically do the job. But in a relationship, even the most bossiest of boss babes don't want a guy who's passive at the end of the day. They typically want a guy that's more masculine than they are. The problem is that a lot of women who really get into their masculine traits because they become boss babes, they are uh so difficult to get along with in the first place that most men don't even want to tolerate that. This just doesn't work out.
yeah, and I suppose it makes it more difficult, doesn't it, for a man if you feel emasculated from the outset. Then it's going to be difficult for you to kind of be happy really and feel confident because that's. I mean, I'm speaking anecdotally for myself, not speaking for everybody. But when you feel masculine and you feel like you know powerful, not in a bad way, but like you feel like you can achieve stuff, you can go and do stuff, you know, independent, that kind of thing. That's when you feel really confident, right? And then it brings out everything else, and then stuff starts to go well. When you feel the opposite, when you feel a bit emasculated or you feel a bit low, like you can't achieve something or whatever, then that pushes you the other way, and you kind of go into your shell. You kind of your head sinks, and then things tend to go badly.
Yeah. We have one of the first articles on the internet that I'm aware of that specifically calls this stuff red pill. It was man, it came out in the early 2000s. This guy went by Hawaiian Libertarian. He had a blog, right? And he wrote this article that was really profound, and it was called the Emasculation Paradox. And it was essentially how society teaches us to, you know, be plow horses and to be more agreeable, but that tends to make women more unhappy. And so it's very counterintuitive, but the key to, you know, keeping that relationship dynamic going is by not allowing her to emasculate you, right? And that's where the betaization process comes in. And it starts with women testing you. They test your frame. They do, you know, we call them frame checks or fitness tests or whatever you want to call it. Um, and the more you fail that, the more she loses respect for you, the more she starts, you know, when she has no respect for you anymore, now she emasculates you, and now she's unhappy with the relationship, and now she either divorces you or cheats on you, you know? So it's like if you bring things back to the beginning and learn what's happening in that process, you can actually change that dynamic around.
Yeah, and more importantly, when they start losing respect for you, you start losing respect for yourself as well.
Oh man, yeah. There's a lot of guys when they come to me, they man, when they're in a dead bedroom situation, there's no worse feeling than that, right? Like some of these guys, they haven't had sex with their wives in like 5 or 6 years, right? Their wife just, you know, whatever excuse under the sun, barely talks to them anymore, and these guys just feel like very less than, you know, very depressed. One guy came to me and he was like, he almost had tears in his eyes because when we had our call and I was sort of bringing up like, okay, like how does that make you feel, you know? And man, you could just see it like him welling up because it just makes guys feel like absolute garbage. And you don't have to feel that way, right? Like you can change this around. But a lot of guys, what they'll end up doing because divorce is so popular nowadays, is they'll either rush to get divorced and think their next marriage is going to be magically better. The divorce rate in the West for third and fourth time marriages, right? Or I'm sorry, second and third time marriages, it just goes up, right? So it's a 50% divorce rate for first time marriage, and then it's something like 70% divorce rate, 60 or 70% divorce rate for second and third time marriages. It's because people never learn the skills to maintain that. They also don't learn how to pick better women. You know, there's a lot of guys, like I said at the very beginning, they just rush into the first girl that's nice to them, and they never take the time to exercise their options and spin plates and date multiple women, and then find like the cream rises to the top when you do that. That's why women do that. Women, we call it spinning plates. Women just call it dating. You know, they are always exercising their options and they're trying to find their best possible option. Like, well, guys need to sort of adopt that strategy because it works really well, you know.
Yeah, I think when like thinking about it, when people kind of leave one marriage, go to another one as well, they tend to find or look for somebody who's completely different or appears completely different at the start.
Hmm.
But I think the issue is never the start. Is it the start is always pretty good from my experience. The start is always pretty good, but then
Yeah.
once you move on, it becomes difficult because that's with time and with more decisions being made and more stuff happening. That's when you kind of go down that road. And if that's the way that you are and you haven't learned how to be different, then you're gonna end up going down that road again with whoever you're with.
Oh yeah, no, that's exactly what happened in my that relationship. That I call her red pill chick because it wasn't until after that second relationship that I sort of had this epiphany that I was the problem, you know. But yeah, that's exactly what happens. People, there's like a honeymoon period when you get together with somebody, and it lasts about 6 months to a year where everybody's on their best behavior, everything's hot and heavy in the beginning. You're both trying to be the most attractive people possible. And then after 6 months to a year, people start letting their guard down. They start showing you who they really are, you know. But by that point, a lot of guys feel like they have so much time invested in this girl that they just overlook all the red flags and stuff, and they just go all in on this relationship that's just not probably not the best idea for them, you know. But yeah, and then they'll fall back on old patterns, like just like I did when because I was so used to being in husband mode where I thought I crossed an imaginary finish line. As soon as I got into that next relationship, I was looking to go right back into husband mode because that was comfortable for me. Right. And it was like, it wasn't until after that relationship that I realized that the work never stops. You always have to be attractive, not be unattractive, if you want a long-term relationship to last, you know. Have you ever read the book The Game by Neil Strauss?
No, I can't say I have.
Man, I'm just dropping all sorts of books on you guys. I'm a kind of a book nerd, but the game by Neil Strauss was a pickup artist book, right? And it was back in the early 2000s. Guys like Mystery, David D'Angelo, Ross Jeffries, Mystery. Did I say Mystery already? And then Neil Strauss. And the biggest takeaway from that book wasn't all the cool pickup artist tricks where they were, gaming girls. It was that these guys were using, basically they were geeks with techniques, right? They were able to get women in bed very quickly, and they were specific types of women they were targeting. It wasn't like every woman in town this game would work on. It was specific women that dressed provocatively and looked like they were party girls, right? They would run this game on them and get them to sleep with them quickly. But it was all a facade, right? It was all tricks and manipulative techniques to get a woman in bed quick, but they never worked on the internal qualities that give you that dominant masculine presence that women want in a long-term relationship. So they couldn't keep any of these women around. That was my biggest takeaway from that book, was these guys were really, really good at getting women into bed. They just couldn't keep women around, and they were miserable, absolutely miserable, because they all wanted a deeper connection at the end of the day, and they just couldn't find one because none of these women would stick around long enough for that. So, yeah, if you really want, if your goal is to just, hit it and quit it and be a permanent plate spinner, I don't have a problem with that. Like, I'm not telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do. Cool. Learn the tips of those be a geek with techniques. Like, you'll have lots of fun with that, right? But if you want a committed relationship, which I would say most guys do, you have to learn the qualities that will keep that attraction going in the long term.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit of a paradox on what people think, right? Because I think most men do want that, but the societal view is that men want the opposite, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so we talked about like women's hypergamous nature, right? Well, men are polygamous by nature. Or polygynist by nature. We do want to. We are hardwired to want to spread our seed far and wide, and have lots of sex, like unlimited sex with unlimited women. Like, that's sort of our hard wiring. Society has really told men not to want that, but you'll still find men who either get into long-term relationships and they still like step out on their wives, right? Or they'll, but we can talk about that in a little bit. Or what they'll do is, to satisfy that itch, is they'll watch a lot of porn, because porn gives them that sort of escape where they can almost like mentally feel like they're having variety without really actually having variety. So we're wired that way. Now the difference between men and women cheating is that, because of women's hypergamous nature, women are more likely when they cheat to fall in love with the person they're cheating with, and not be in love with the guy that they're cheating on anymore, right? Women are like 9 times out of 10 going to be madly in love with the new guy, right? Men, on the other hand, because we're wired to sort of look at sex like it's a utility, and like a, sort of a entertainment, we actually, men can cheat on their wives and not feel anything, and nine times out of 10 they don't feel anything, and it's just to have that variety, and they still love their wives, so it's because men and women are wired differently. I'm not saying one's better or the other, or men and women should cheat or whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but that's just what it is.
Yeah, I've read an interesting book recently that I don't know if you've read it. It's The Ape That Understood the Universe.
Oh no, the ape. I'm going to write that
Honestly,
down. Is it
It's a
good?
crack. Yeah, it's really good, and it digs into the science behind this. Um, y- but well, behind all of this stuff that we've been talking about, really, about how genetically it's kind of evolved, how psychologically things have evolved, and it's really interesting, and there's quite a lot of interesting takes on the stuff. It's quite a long one, in depth, but it's really really good. I'd recommend it.
Is it like a story, like like a novel, or is it
No, no, it's not a novel, but it's let me have a look. I've got him here somewhere. Let me find the chap.
I have a friend in the space. His name is Paul Benjamin. He likes to use ape studies to discuss intersexual dynamics with humans because they work very much similar ways, right? Like men are very hierarchical and women are more uh, what is it? They're more like a committee driven, right? So the community driven. And so women do, like the female chimps, they all want to be the good chimp in the community, or at least appear that way, right? And it's like it's very interesting how like men and women are very similar to our ape cousins.
Yeah, it's by Steve Stewart Williams. It is the book, and he's um, he's a scholar that works in the field essentially about kind of genetic development and that kind of stuff, and human psychology and a combination of those things. And he digs right into the weeds of it. It's really really it's opened my mind up to lots of different things and ways of looking at stuff and thinking about things. So it's very pertinent for what the stuff that we've been talking about, and I think you'll be quite interested in it. So it's worth a
Oh,
read.
yeah, if it's on Audible, I'll definitely add it to my
Yeah,
Audible
well,
list.
I say read. That's what I've been doing and listening to it. To be fair, in the car, but yeah,
Oh,
it's
good.
really
Yeah,
good.
my man.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I if I have to sit down and read a paperback, it'll take me months. But if I can get it on Audible, which all my books are on Audible, if I can get it on Audible, it's like I can knock out a book a week, because I listen
Yeah,
to it while
same.
I'm at the
I'll bang it
gym
on the
or
car. This
yeah.
is a long one, mind. I think it's a good 9 hours. I think.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a big one, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
I don't mind longer ones if they draw me in and keep me
Yeah,
engaged. But if they're too long and I'm like, oh God, I'll
yeah.
skip it.
No, there's a lot of value in it. It is very good. I would
Oh,
recommend it.
all
So,
right. Yeah, I'll add that to my list.
but yeah, it digs into all the kind of genetic developments, and it compares how we've developed versus kind of chimps versus bonobos versus all these other kind of animals and species, and kind of the explanations behind why, and the different theories that exist about why and stuff pro- within the scientific fields, really. So it's more that than kind of mainstream stuff. It's more what's scientifically accepted, and what they think moving forward, which gives a good kind of baseline and understanding for this kind of stuff, because it goes into relationships, and why we are different, men and women, and why we want different things, and why we're looking for certain things, and then it goes into kind of group dynamics, why groups are different and stuff. It's really good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good.
Sweet. Paul, I've been meaning to ask you, since you mentioned it at the start, when you're in the Navy, did you ever go to Bahrain?
Yep. I've been to Bahrain. Yeah.
Man, because I've been to the Navy base there
Uh-huh.
in Bahrain. It was pretty decent, to be fair, because I was in the Royal Air Force.
Were you? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
We used to call that place ASU, the Alcohol Support Unit.
yeah. It was brilliant. Because like I think we had this little shack basically. Because like Brits, when we go away, we have terrible stuff, and then whenever we can get the chance to go to like American Air Force base or naval base, wherever it is, it's so much better because you have like huge gyms and like everything. You have bars and
Yeah.
shops, and honestly, it was brilliant.
You know what though? On US or on British Navy ships, they have alcohol on the ship, but we don't on our ships. So like if we could get a chance to go over to like a British ship or whatever, like we usually get blitz
Yeah,
right? And
that's the only thing we do better, because I think like every American base I've been to, even the ones with alcohol, they have like a 2-can rule or something, but we'd be getting leathered all the time.
Oh man. Oh, well, we definitely didn't. The last time I was in Bahrain, my friend and I, we must have drank 9 pitchers of Strongbow. You know what Strongbow is?
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
cider. Yeah,
it's hard cider, right? We drank 9 pitchers of that, and I could barely walk, man. Like back to the base, I was so sick that night.
yeah. Bauer is a good place. I really, really loved it. It's pretty westernized, right?
Oh, well, yes and no. Like you can go out in town. There's the souk. I went to the souk there, which is like a swap meet. They have like Pizza Hut and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
it's still
Where did
very.
you go, Paul? Because when I went, they had a Baskin Robbins, they had everything there. They had a big cinema complex, and
Um,
they had loads of stuff.
I think the last time I was there was in 2000. Yeah, so they might, it
Okay,
might
I
it might be
think
a lot better now, but
yeah,
back then they it was still very conservative. A lot of women wearing, was it facial coverings and stuff like that, and
yeah. Well, when
um,
I went 2013, it was very westernized, and they were very kind of they've done a lot of development there, and it's very tailored to the American market as well. So it was pretty good.
oh, okay, yeah, maybe it's more like Dubai now, but yeah, when I went there, like you couldn't get alcohol out in town. That's why we would stay at the base bar and get lit up there. Otherwise, it's more fun to go out in town in local places to get lit up.
Oh yeah, we used
I
to go out in
think.
town all the time. That's the thing. So you did have loads of bars and places that you could just go and drink and stuff. So they
Oh,
obviously they are kind of copying that kind of Dubai kind of template,
okay.
really.
Yeah, because Dubai, I mean, that place is just a resort town, like that like lots of Russians out there. A lot of Russians vacationing out in Dubai and stuff. But yeah, Bahrain, when I went there, it wasn't the greatest place. I remember the first time I went there in 98, um, I stayed at Manai Plaza, which was like a hotel ran by Marines. So it was basically barracks. They just took over a hotel and they would put like 10 sailors in a room and just have mattresses everywhere. And I just remember one time, like when I first got there, they had like a helicopter landing area surrounded by razor wire. And then they had Marines with M14s, at the ready. And I remember I ordered a pizza one night and I go down to the front gate because the Marines called me down. I go down there and they have a machine gun in the guy's face while the other guy's checking the pizza for bombs. And I'm like, oh man, here's an extra tip, bro. Like, sorry for you having to deal with that. I'm
Yeah,
just trying
well,
to get my pizza here. But so it must have, maybe
that's it.
it's chilled out quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've definitely gone down that Dubai route now. It's pretty relaxed out there, and it's a quite a nice environment. They've done a lot of construction and stuff. So,
Oh, good. Okay. I still
but
don't want to go back, but
yeah, no, it's pretty good out there. But where can people kind of find out a bit more about you then, Paul, if they want to kind of see more of your stuff, listen to your podcast and stuff?
I think the best place to go would be go to my website, fixeddeadbedrooms.com. It's a blog, and I try to put up daily articles if I can on just tips to fix your marriage dynamics or a long-term relationship. If you're not, officially married, that's fine. It'll help you with that too. You can find all my books there. I have 3 books available, and then you can find the podcast there. I highly recommend you guys get my latest book. If you are in like a situation where your wife really has lost that attraction and sex is like, if it's happening at all, it's like once a month and when she does it, she's like a starfish. Get my latest book. Get her to F you again. You can find it on Amazon, but you'll find it on fixeddeadbedrooms.com. And if you read that book and you're trying to apply that to your relationship or marriage and you're struggling with that, you can book a call with me if you go to fixeddeadbedrooms.com as well. There's a link at the top where you can book a free call with me and we can get on a call. And if I can help you, I'll show you what that looks like. And if I can't, I'll at least point you in the right direction.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. It's been awesome having you on the show. I've really enjoyed the conversation and stuff. Do you have any kind of final thoughts or messages that you want to leave people with?
Um, I'll say this: if you guys are not married and you're out dating right now, I think what will help most guys in that situation, if they want to get into a long term relationship that's going to work, is develop the mindset that you don't have to qualify yourself to her. She needs to qualify herself to you. You need to find out if you even like her or not. Keep your options open and don't just get tunnel vision on one girl. Make sure that you're weighing your options. It's going to be more efficient that way. And then make sure that you're setting the tone and taking the lead when you're out dating, and test a woman's interest level and test her ability to follow your lead. There's going to be a lot of women that aren't going to want to follow your lead. That's fine. They're just not good long-term relationship candidates. That's fine. Just make sure that you end things quickly and move on to the next woman. You'll be way more efficient out there when you do it that way. If you guys are in long-term relationships, just realize, I think the biggest takeaway here is really try to take a step back from looking at your wife like she's your equal partner, and learn to be more decisive, learn to set the tone more. I like to use the dinner debate analogy where, you ask your wife, hey, where do you want to eat? And she goes, I don't know, where do you want to eat? And that's just this endless, annoying argument you always get into. Stop doing that. Just be the guy that says, hey, honey, we're going to go out to the pub tonight. Grab your shoes, right? Like, be that guy, because you'll find that 9 times out of 10, that's what she wants at the end of the day. A lot of guys want their girl to be happy, so they try to leave decision making up to her. Don't. What will make her happy is you being decisive and her not having to think about it, because women just want to show up looking hot at the end of the day. So I would say try to develop that mindset. And then if you want more information on that, definitely read my books, because that'll really open your eyes to what's really going on.
Amazing. Paul, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. You take care of yourself, okay?
All right, you too.
Okay, bye.
All right, that was good.
There you go. Cheers, man. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was a